So one of the favorite topics on the channel is logistics outsourcing and the process of outsourcing and some of the mistakes that people make when they're outsourcing. This week we are talking to one of our outsourcing specialists, Urszula Kelly, about some of the fails that people make as they go through the outsourcing process, and that's coming right up. So logistics outsourcing is one of the most popular topics on the channel, and today I'm very lucky to have dragged away from our client Urszula Kelly, who's one of our specialists in logistics outsourcing here at Logistics Bureau. Welcome, Urszula. Thank you for joining us today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
And we're going to be talking about logistics outsourcing. So you've got a lot of experience in outsourcing. And in fact, at one point you ran your own 4PL business. So tell us, that might be the topic of another video at some point, but tell us what you see as some of the big mistakes that people make through the outsourcing process.
There are quite a few, but I'm going to list three biggest ones that I see are quite repetitive. Number one is focusing on price and price only when choosing your outsourced logistics provider. Of course, we understand that price is very important to any business dealing. However, there are other factors that should be considered because they can be equally or even more important at times, like your provider's location. Their commitment to safety and compliance, their experience in your field, the experience with your competitors. So there are many, many things that, in my opinion, should be considered even before the price. Because if something seems commercially too cheap, most likely when it comes to the execution, it will be actually really expensive.
That's a really good point. And it's interesting, when we talk to our consulting clients, as you know, they'll very often say, oh, it's not about the price, but kind of under the surface, we know it is. And it's, when you're guiding someone through the outsourcing process, you've really almost got to try and push that to the background to a degree, haven't you? Price is important, absolutely important, but it's not necessarily the primary driver, is it?
It is not, but we just have to distinguish between a price on paper and price in reality. When we are getting to know,
explain that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's easy to have a look at the rate card and think, okay, well, this looks fantastic. It's, you're much cheaper than other competitors. But understanding what are the extras, what are going to be penalties if we take too long to load or unload, what are the, after hour fees, what this, what that. So just understanding that rate card and making sure it is 100% comprehensive and it covers all possibilities is extremely important.
Okay, so before you joined us here at Logistics Bureau, you were doing a lot of logistics work in the oil and gas sector and project logistics. So, what were some of the traps that people fell into in that industry where the costs would be higher than expected?
Number one, the marriage fees. We were delivering a lot of freight to mine sites. Mine sites are obviously big places. Sometimes the drivers had to, sit there for 6-7 hours to wait to be unloaded because there was no one available to do it. They were busy with something else. There was no equipment to unload. And 7 hours of the marriage can be around $1,000, which adds a lot of cost. So yeah, definitely the marriage was number one problem.
So for people who are fairly new to supply chain, and I know we have a lot of subscribers on the channel who are, a demurrage fee is basically an additional charge for making the truck and the driver wait. So you're very common at ports picking up containers and things like that. So it's a really, really good point with the sort of heavy industries that you've been involved with. So if number one error is a focus on price, what would be a number two for you?
Number two, not reviewing your current arrangements. I often see contracts that go on for 2-3+ years, and they are not regularly reviewed, or then they're not reviewed at all. So what I like to say to clients, even if you are extremely satisfied with your current provider, and you see no reasons to seek other solutions, you should still review the contract, benchmark the rates, and benchmark the supply chain as a whole, because maybe market price changed and you have no idea about it, and maybe you should be paying less, or maybe your provider is asking you for a price increase. How are you going to know whether that's a reasonable request or not? Maybe there is a technology out there available that your current provider is not offering to you. Who are your competitors working with, and why? So these are very, very important questions that you should be asking yourself constantly. Just because you found an arrangement that you're happy with now, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be checking whether this is really what I should be getting and this is really the best I could be getting.
Mm. No, that's a great point. And I was just reflecting there as you were saying that about, some companies that I know where they may have had a relationship with the same freight company for 20 years. And on the one hand, that's great. It's a valuable, trusted relationship, and the service is great. But it doesn't mean that you ought not to keep your eye out on what's available in the market, if only to prompt your current service provider to do new things, because perhaps you can get a little bit stuck in a rut in the contract and not be looking for ways to innovate and improve.
Yeah, 100%. And it's really easily done because, you're busy with running business. And if you're outsourcing your logistics, that already tells me that logistics is not your core business. Therefore, you're busy with other things. And it's just really easy to forget about this sort of arrangement. So I would say, review it every probably 6 to 12 months. So you have a peace of mind that the solution that you are provided with is the best for your supply chain and for your business.
Very good. So that's number 2. What's number 3?
Not paying attention, not paying enough attention to KPI reporting. And again, it's something I see all the time. Everybody knows that KPI word, but there are many businesses that still don't execute them very well. So when it comes to outsourcing your logistics, you should be very, very clear at what KPIs are of interest to you, how you want them to be tracked, how you want them to be reported, what are goal values for those KPIs, what are the consequences for not meeting those KPIs. If someone asks me about what do you think is one of the most important things to a healthy supply chain, I would say definitely knowing your numbers. Therefore, don't just think it's something to worry about once a year, but be very, very strict on what KPIs you want to see, why you want to see them, and what's the importance of them.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I suppose we often forget sometimes, don't we, that in selecting the KPIs, it's not about having a whole bunch of KPIs, it's about having the right ones. And maybe when you're first looking at these logistics contracts, whether that be freight or warehousing, you really need to focus on what do we want as an outcome, what do we want as a result here, and make sure that that's the thing that you measure. I think a lot of people just measure stuff without really picking KPIs that help drive performance.
I agree with you. And when we say, let's say we want 95% delivery in full on time, what does it actually mean? Is it just, an ambitious number that someone put in place? But we need to understand what it means, how we can contribute to that number, how our supplier can contribute to that number. What process can we put in place? Is this number realistic? So again, it's not just about setting an ambitious number because, it looks great. 95 or 100% always looks fantastic, but is it achievable for our business? And if it's not, maybe we should reconsider those numbers, to be fair.
No, that's true. And in fact, if I can take you back to that sort of first point about the price and the rates, one of the things that we find with our clients is they very often don't appreciate that having the right rate structure is important. And I'm just thinking how, the rate structure and the KPI is really tied together, because
absolutely
you've got to have the right KPI, but you've got to have the right rate structure that drives the right behavior too. So, if you're paying $1 per ton or $1 per pallet or $1 per truckload, so make sure that you're paying for the service in the way that's going to drive the right behaviors. I can remember years ago an example where a very large retailer was paying for freight, and it was a truck rate. So, regardless of how much was on the truck, they were paying, X dollars per truckload to go to their stores. Well, guess what? The trucks weren't often very full because the transport company was getting paid anyway. So just by moving to a pallet rate, suddenly all the trucks were full and they got much better productivity.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there is the other part, the other relationship between price and KPI is, again, going back to that very, very cheap price. Okay, I'm going to get a fantastic deal here, but my KPIs are never met. Therefore, maybe this is not the right provider for me. Maybe I shouldn't be driven by price. So there are just many, many things to consider when it comes to KPIs and pricing.
Yeah. Now, you prompted me to think of something else there, which is, very often when people are going through this process, and be it warehousing or transport, and they've gone to market, they've got some quotes, and they're looking at those quotes. I always say to people that if you have put together your request for tender or request for quotation in a helpful way for those suppliers, so it's detailed and it's telling them exactly what service you want and how you want the service performed. If you've done that well and they've got enough information, the right information to quote for you, I'm always fascinated to see the quotes come in, because they should be within 10 or 15% of each other price-wise, if everybody's understood the task. And I'm always a little bit alarmed if one comes in a lot cheaper than the others. Inexperienced people will think, "Oh, that's great! Look, we've got a cheap one here. We'll save a lot of money." No, they may have misunderstood the task, or they may be trying to buy the contract. They want to get into your industry, and they're willing to not make money.
Yeah, of course. But that goes back to how are you choosing your supplier, your logistics provider? You need to make sure that they completely understand your process. You need to make sure that you understand how they operate. So that approach to tender needs to be collaborative. You cannot run a dictatorship when choosing a provider. It needs to be a two-way conversation, so there is understanding, and that way you can have a healthy supply chain.
Yeah. I think we might have to do a couple more videos on these sort of topics, because you mentioned something there, collaborative approach. And I know you've been working with a couple of our clients recently on that collaborative tendering approach. We might have to talk about that. And I'd be fascinated to have you share some of your experiences with very remote logistics here in Australia and project logistics and things like that.
Absolutely.
So Urszula, thank you. Three simple things that people get wrong with outsourcing, and that was the focus on the price alone, really not sort of market testing their current relationship. So, don't just ditch a company, try to repair a relationship if it's not working that well, and also look around to see what other things that company could be doing in terms of innovation and so on. And getting the right KPI is really important. So 3 great tips.
Absolutely.
Maybe we could invite a few questions down below in the comments. If people have any questions about outsourcing, or if you'd like to hear other sort of tips on outsourcing, do please comment down below. If you are new to the channel, do have a look at the subscribe button down there. Click on that. And if you hit the bell, then you'll be notified every time we have a new video coming out. And they generally come out on a Tuesday evening, Sydney time. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Urszula, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We'll certainly have you back to share some more of your expertise. And we'll see you all next week. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.